Then welcome everybody to our Getting to Know You interview here. The three beautiful ladies on my right are, in the middle is Peggy Davis, and then Penny, her daughter, and good friend Ethel. And I'd like to invite the two of them to say a few words of introduction for Peggy.
It's my pleasure. I'm Penny. I'm Peggy's fourth child, and I was born in Florida, where Peggy spent a lot of fun time being Peggy. And that's one thing I can say about Peg being my mom. It's been a lot of fun. Man, what a trip. And I couldn't be happier that she's here at Nazareth House now, meeting such wonderful quality people, and that you've all come out today to be part of this and listen to my mom's journey. And thank you very much, and I love you very much, Mom. Mwah. And I'll pass it over to her new life, to Ethel.
I don't think they all
Okay.
I'm Ethel, and I got to know Peggy about 7 months ago when she moved into the Nazareth House. I was attracted to Peggy, first of all, by her snarky sense of humor, which matched mine. As I got to know Peggy, I realized that she was a woman of many, many talents, and she shares these talents with us all as she goes along. And she'll share them today with all of you as she tells us about her life. So anyway, break a leg, Peggy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to begin by just giving a very brief outline of Peggy's life so that you'll see that we're going to need to keep moving in order to even touch the highlights. She was born in Washington, D.C. and raised there, married at 17, divorced after 8 years with 3 children to support. She started looking for a job. What seemed to be offered to her, or she was encouraged to get into, was stuff like secretarial stuff and administrative stuff, which didn't suit. So she finally decided, I'm going to pursue what I want. Okay. Finally decided, I'm going to pursue what I want to do. Is that better? Okay. And she decided what she wanted was television. Why not? And so she got a job in Washington, D.C. with TV, then moved to Florida. You can tell more about that. And then to California with KNXT, and then going into Fox. And she retired from Fox, but she didn't quite retire. She got into a whole bunch of other things, ending up in Westchester. And we'll leave it at, well, actually ending up here. So we'll leave it at that. So, Peggy, what would you like to tell us?
Well, I'd like to tell you how I got into television.
How did you get into television?
Well, I was going to one of these appointments that my father and my mother had made for me, and I didn't want to do. My father wanted me to work in a bank. My mother wanted me to go into the government where she was working, but I would have to start out in the secretarial pool. I figured I might last a day and a half before they came and carried me out of there, because there's all these people typing in a row. And so I stopped the car and I thought, what can I get into that I can grow in? What's new? And I thought of television. And there was a television station right behind my old high school. So I turned the car around and I went up there, and I went in and I said, I'd like to apply for a job. And they said, well, we don't have any jobs open right now, but you can go up to Human Resources and fill out an application. So I did, and on the back of the application it said, previous experience. Well, I didn't think working as a sales girl at Sears during the holidays was anything I wanted to put on there. So I started saying, I wrote this big snow job about how I hadn't had any experience and I could just soak up whatever I had to learn, blah, blah, blah. And they took it into the personnel director and he read it and he says, I want to see her. I knew, I've got my toe in the door now. So I go in and have this interview with him. He says, well, we have somebody that we are getting ready to let go because he's just not doing well. And he sent me down to see the boss of that area, the boss of facilities. And it was a CBS station for Washington, D.C., called WTOP, and the third floor was dedicated to CBS News, and that was for all over, you know, New York and everything. So I went down and talked to Mr. Cleese, and he said, well, we are going to let this guy go, so just keep in touch. Well, he shouldn't have said that, because the next week I called him every day. And I said, you know, I'm going out for some interviews and everything, and so I want to let you know I might get another job and you'll lose the chance to have me on your payroll. And by Friday, he said, oh, Peggy, I can't stand these calls anymore. Come in, you're hired. Come in on Monday. And that's how I got into television. And while I was there, I worked in facilities, and that was, you know, pretty much, I handled the everything for the building, all the packages in and all the packages out, the mail room and the supplies, and I set up stuff for the supplies so it would be easier. And so in just a few months, Jimmy Dean was going to go network, and he had a country music program, and so I was hired by this was on Saturday, so this was the extra money too, and I was going to be assistant to the producer. So I would come in on Saturday morning. It aired at 12 live, 12 noon, and I get all the breakfast handled and everything, and I had that, do the setups around. And then just before the show, I had to get 2 aspirin to the band leader. I had to do all this last minute stuff, and they decided they were going to have a little cart with peanuts in it and everything for some song that they were going to sing. And so they sent me over across the street to the grocery store to buy all the peanuts. And I'm standing in line and people are looking at me. I've got the whole thing. I said, I have a pet elephant. So they just kept looking askew at me. But anyway, that's one of the things I had to get. I had to get some felt to put on the bottom of Jimmy's shoes because it's making too much noise walking around. Just things like that. It was really challenging and fun. And I was assigned to Jimmy because I didn't actually work for him, and he wasn't very nice to most of his staff, and I didn't care. So when a commercial would come, it was time to change his clothes, like put a different sweater on or something, and I would come out and give it to him and everything, and he put it on, and he says, well, what about my hair? I said, here's a comb. He says, well, I need a mirror. I said, look into my shining eyes. You know, I didn't care. I didn't care, and worked really well with him. And then he was supposed to go up one night to be on the Ed Sullivan show. So we had, at WTOP, it was mostly political, so we didn't have a lot of dressing rooms or anything like that. We had only one makeup room, and they had, about 6 women singers and men too, and all together. So I have a picture of me because I've got his suit in one hand and I'm shoving him into the bathroom, just a little bathroom, so he can change. And so then, anyway, that's what I did there. And then I got transferred to Orlando because I was going to take my children down there because they had asthma and they needed to get out of the dampness. And I was transferred to a small station down there, WDBO, which would, the radio, when they first went on radio, it was WDBO, way down by Orlando where the oranges grow. So I went to the television station, and it wasn't the office, it was actually the studios right at the bottom of the transmitter. The transmitter was really high, I can't remember how many feet, but when something would go wrong and one of the technicians had to go up there and climb up there, they would call me out because I had the biggest voice and he could hear me. When I left that station, they put in intercoms. So it was really fun because we were involved with the space activities because it was our first ones, Mercury astronauts and everything. And when you would go over to Cocoa Beach, there was just nightclubs all up and down Cocoa Beach, and then, you know, the gantries and everything up here. And I would go to get my hair cut, and I would stay the weekend. And you go out at night, and you're in the nightclub, and they're dancing around, and all of a sudden you're dancing with an astronaut because there was no security. You can't believe that now.
They didn't need it.
No. Alan Shepard's poking around on his Corvette, and Wally Sherrard joined us one time when we were having a beach beer party, the CBS technicians and everything, and just came up and had a couple beers with us. So that was exciting.
So as you say, the launch wasn't the only blast
That's
in the
what
area.
I said, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So,
But in 1965, it says that you were told that being a woman, you were not eligible to receive any further promotions.
because
You hit the glass ceiling, because then you'd be making more money than the men.
yes, and I said, when can I take my vacation? And I started sending resumes out here like crazy. And so I did come out here, and I had an interview with Bob Wood, the CEO of KNXT, which is now KCBS. And he said, well, you know, you can come out here willy-nilly, Peggy, and substitute for all around everybody when they go on vacation, but I can't promise you a position because maybe they'll all come back and there won't be any place to work. And I said, okay, I'll do that. Because I told him I'm probably the only woman that knows everything it takes to put on a show. In fact, when I was in Orlando, if the boom man didn't show up for Romper Room, I was the boom man. And Miss Nancy, who was a friend of mine, she'd say to the children, okay, now we're all going to get up and dance around the room. And I'm saying, no. And also I would switch a break sometimes. I was a film editor, and I really wasn't a film editor, but they told me that when you see a long streak here, that means nobody's talking, just break it there. So, because I came from where they had unions. So, let's see what else I
Well, and then you got a story about the Watts riots.
Oh yeah, I told Bob Wood that I would come out and do the substitution for different jobs and traffic and that sort of thing. While I was there, his secretary of many, many years was going to get married, and she was an older lady and everything, not as old as us, but she was just like this, and she's trying to show me what to do, and I told Bob, I said, I told you I wasn't a secretary. He says, well, I'm the boss and you're going to be my secretary. So the second day that he would walk in every morning and say, hi, Pego, what's new? And the second day when he did that, I said, how about the news wagon getting turned over in Watts early this morning? And he just ran out to the newsroom, which was good for me because I had gone through all of his personal stationery like crazy because I kept making mistakes with typing. And so I was there for the Watts riots, and they couldn't communicate with New York by phone, talking about security. There were no fax machines, so we had to go by Western Union to tell them what's happening in New York. And he had screens in his room and in his office with all the different stations on it to see how they're covering and how we are covering. And all the suits would be in there, sitting in their comfortable chairs, watching it, and I'd be standing behind them, putting my 2 cents worth in every minute. and none of them asked me to leave because they knew my relationship with Bob, because he was really lenient with me. And at the last day, he dictated a long letter, and I had told him I had fast notes, but they weren't fast. They weren't fast at all. And I'd sit as far away from the phone so he'd have to answer it, and then I could go back and write in some of the words that I missed. And I went and did a draft, and I brought it back to him, and there's all these little blank spaces. He said, "What are these?" I said, "Well, I didn't get the words, but I know you're such a wordsmith that you'll be able to put the right word in there." And he just laughed and did it. So at the end of the day, I said, "How did I do as a secretary?" He said, "Well, you made a great cup of coffee." I told him I didn't do that. So then I transferred. Somebody didn't come back from summer vacation, and it was the videotape librarian. And that was down on the technical area and where all the studios were, and there were nothing but men down there. And they said, well, I don't know whether they were hesitant because they didn't know whether I'd be able to lift the 90-minute tapes and everything. I said, listen, I've had 4 children and I lifted them all okay, so they gave me the job. And I overheard one of the men saying, oh, we're going to have to clean up our language now that we have a woman down here. They didn't know me. So I said, well, I hope you do, because I just can't stand that vulgar S-H-I-T. And then they laughed and everything. We all got along. So it was fun. And from there, I went over to TV City. They position in scheduling was open. I didn't know what that entailed, and maybe if I'd known, I wouldn't have gone. But I did go, and
you don't want to tell us about the moment in your career when you were a model?
Oh, but that's over in TV City.
Oh, okay. You had that.
Here's what happened. My boss was on the line with this AD, that's assistant director, who was very excitable, and he's saying, "Where's my color girl?" And this is a mannequin. No, this was a blonde model would come and stand in front of the audience and the cameras, and they would match the cameras up so that the colors would match, so that when they switched to one camera to the other, you wouldn't know it. And it was a video operator downstairs doing that. And I ran out on the stage and I said to the cameraman, because he could talk to the director in the control booth, and I said, tell Howie that I'm the color girl. And Howie says, well, I need somebody with blonde hair. I said, you tell Howie this is as good as he's going to get tonight. And so I was standing there, and they were lining up the cameras, and it's boring. And the audience were out here waiting for the show to be taped. And so I said, well, seeing as how I'm standing here, I might as well tell you what's happening. And I told them about matching the color and everything else. Then I said, you can ask me any questions you want to. So they started asking questions, and I started answering them, and there was a lot of laughter and clapping and applause. When I left, when I walked off the stage, there was a big round of applause, and I see Red Skelton poking around the curtain to see who's warming up his audience. And he always gives us this little wave like this, so I went. So that's that story.
Okay, so TV City from
Yeah.
67 to 76. And I underlined scheduling here.
Yes, okay, scheduling is like in a big room like this with desks all around and everything, and people going crazy, and my phone's ringing off the hook, and you scheduled everything that took to put a show on. I scheduled dressing rooms, which was I didn't think it would be very important, but it is, because not all the dressing rooms were the same, and not were all the celebrities.
And you ran
coming
into
in.
a few different personalities
Yes.
with regard to the dressing room.
Lucille Ball said she was never coming here again because would put her in a GD, you fill in the blanks, broom closet. I was on vacation. And whenever we were set up the dressing rooms, we'd figure out who we could put where with the stage manager. The stage manager shouldn't have let that happen. So I was told, tongue in cheek, you can never have a vacation again. And so dressing rooms, screening rooms, how many cameras, how many booms, any of the facilities. And I'd put out a production schedule, and it would be delivered around, because we had no computers or anything like that. Everything had to be written out or typed out. And then there were people that would put names by the cameraman, and then the daily schedule would come out of my area and be put up on the wall in the technician's room. So we also had a great big piece of furniture like architects have, with a slanting top, and then drawers underneath, and we had a big book on there. It's called the Big Book. That's what we called it. And it had the studios on it, and you wrote in Red Skelton for Thursday, Friday, and Studio 33, Studio 43, and Carol Burnett in Studio 33, and everything, and how long they would be there, and that was my thing that I did.
Now, Carol Burnett's, at the end of her season, there was a flip show.
Yes.
And you did an interesting little performance there, shall we say.
Yeah. That's what the cast would take over and do, a flip show, to show somebody would play Carol Burnett, somebody would play somebody else and everything, Harvey Korman. And
So the cast played the stars.
Yeah,
The crew played the stars.
And you sign up if you want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed up, but the only one that was left was the greeting that she does. You know, she comes out and greets the audience in something Bob Mackie would wear. So I came out in this orange, beautiful robe and everything, and now I had shills in the audience from my department to ask me questions, and so one of the questions was, what are you going to do on the summer hiatus, you know, where we're not working here? And I said, well, let me show you. And I turned my back to them. I took off the robe, and I had camouflage type, you know, army stuff on.
Army fatigues, yeah.
Yeah, fatigues. And on the back it said Peace Corps, P-I-E-C-E Corps. And then I turned around and I had gold tassels hanging from the pockets here. And one of the writers asked me a question, and I thought, oh my God. He says, well, could you twirl
Twirl
those tassels in circles?
different directions.
I said, no. If I could do that, I wouldn't be up here doing this silly skit. and Carol was right over here, watching the whole thing. And I became friends with her because she had, one of the first couple of days I worked there, I was going across the roof to the other door to the rehearsal halls, and she was coming out, and we almost ran into each other. That was my first encounter with her. But she also liked to do exercise class, and she invited anybody in the building could come to the exercise class. But I had to find a place to put the exercise class, and it was not easy because it was pretty filled up with the real shows and everything. So she and I would have a discussion about that every day. And then we used to talk to each other about our children. And I had a son that was into drugs, and she had a daughter that was into drugs. It was that time, it was in the mid-'70s. And my son died in 1975. He was 25 years old, and it was from drugs. And then her daughter did not die. She beat it, but she was a smoker. And many years later, she died from emphysema and that sort of thing, or whatever. And I saw Carol after that at some kind of award ceremony, and I went up to talk to her. And I said, well, at least you had her for another 10 or 15 years. And she said yes. And then we both cried. Anyway, she was a wonderful person. She is a wonderful person. When you would talk to Carol, she would take your hands and look right in your eyes and just listen. She was really, really she is a really very, very sweet person. And I treasure that friendship.
I'm sure that there are more stories from Television City, but you were lured away from CBS by Trans-American Video after 10 years.
Yeah.
But during that time, you got a pilot's license.
Yes, I learned.
And can you tell us anything about learning to fly? And
yeah, I always wanted to learn how
there.
to fly. And in Washington, D.C. during the war, only Civil Air Patrol, that people that owned a small plane, they were allowed to fly. So one of them was the boss, my father's boss, and his name was Dusty. Isn't that great for a pilot? And so he took me up, and I guess I was about 12 years old, 12 or 13. And he said, would you like to do some barrel rolls and some lazy eights? And I said, well, sure. So we did all of that. My mother is standing down there watching this, and she's leaning up against a white hanger, and she's as white as that, and I am loving it. I did never want to land, and so I always wanted to fly from that. And then I had children, and then my second husband didn't want me to fly because of but he didn't even know it, but I went up with the photographer from WBDO, well, I can't even speak, and Penny flew before she was born. And so I went to a fixed base operation. That's an office that people that want to lease their planes to make some money, they lease it to this office, and they have instructors there and everything, and somebody has to schedule that, all these planes and how much money and who's going to be the instructor. So I went over and I went up, and it was fine. I want to do this. And my instructor, I looked at him, I said, what are you, in grade school or something? He was so young, but he knew what he's doing. And so we made a deal that I would come in on weekends when I'm not working at television and schedule the planes. So one day they had a fixed, what do I want to say? they had planes out so that you could come and look at them. I know there's a word. And you wouldn't fly on them or anything. You just went and looked at them. Well, I looked at one, and it was a biplane. And I started talking to the guy that owned it and was the pilot. And I said, I'd just about give anything to fly in this plane. Before I knew it, the parachute was going on me, and I was in the back seat of that plane. And we went out off of Malibu, and we did all kinds of lazy A's and barrel rolls, and you name it. And inverted flying, which I found out from one of the instructors that worked with me. The plane was not for flying. It was not, well, to fly inverted, the oil disappears, and then you know, and I don't mean that it leaks, but it just doesn't cover the
Right.
engine, and there's
So
a way
to clunk out on you.
yeah, and I said, well, too bad, you can't take it away from me. I've already done it. So I had a good time with them. All
right. So you left CBS for Trans-American Video, but that only lasted a year or less, and they
Yes,
kind of
I was
folded out from under you or something?
And in the 70s, I was going to make more than $100 more, and that was a big deal in the 70s. So I put away the $100, kind of knowing that maybe I better do that. And I was in charge of scheduling all of the technicians, and they were doing post-production work. That's where you go in and fix things that have not, it's sort of editing. And they were starting to be fired, let go, because hiatus was coming up. Hiatus means a vacation, and not, you know, these shows that we're working for are not going to be making shows anymore for a while. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall and my boss, who had lured me away, said he'd like to take me to lunch at the room at the top. And it was a Sunset and Vine. So we're going up in the elevator, and I said, Mark, I just want you to know that I've already processed this, that I'm going not be here. You're going to let me go. You know, I know how that is, and so I've already processed it. So let's just go have a nice lunch. And he said, oh, Peggy, thank you, because he was felt so bad about it. And so after I left there, I went to work for Sarlo Company. They're real estate by this time. I worked for them before when I was working back at TV City, when it got really quiet and I wasn't making any overtime. I found a tax place that I could go work part-time in the evenings. So I worked with them before, and so I went over and got a job with them.
Okay. Can we fast forward here
Yeah.
a little bit? Because you spent a number of years mainly as executive assistants in a number of things, like the real estate, real sales and tax
That's what
consultant,
yeah.
Mountain Gate Country Club, CL Peck Construction. Then you went up to Arroyo Grande on the Central Coast and
Yes.
were a manager of the Chamber of Commerce. And let me see, Rock Glow Advertising Agency. And then you became a car salesperson, the first woman to train for a car salesperson, at least in the Central
At
Coast.
San Luis Obispo.
In San Luis Obispo. And then shop steward, and went back down to Orange County because of your mother's failing health, public relations agency, and finally you ended up here in Culver City and got an administrative assistant position just down the street at 20th Century Fox.
Right.
Why don't you resume the story from there?
Okay. Well, so I went to work for 20th Century Fox, and about well, less than a year, I got ovarian cancer, and I had a tumor removed as big as a football, and I make a joke about the doctors faded back for a pass, and they took out my ovaries and everything, and I beat it. Knock on wood. And the doctor for cancer,
Oncologist?
yes, my oncologist said he was always glad to see me. I go once a year. He said, because I see so many people that don't make it. And so after that, I went back to Fox, and I'm trying to think of some of the things that
Well, one of the things that you note here was the newly organized licensing and merchandising.
yeah.
And you were instrumental in getting the studios to be paid for placing products in their, in their
it's
films.
product placement. They used to just call up, the director would call Coca-Cola and say, would you send over 2 or 3 cases, and it was for the crew, and they'd put it in the show. And that was okay up to the point where 20th Century Fox, we want to get paid for this, to help pay for the show. And so we had to do product placement. And one of the things, the first one we did was Home Alone. Juicy Juice we did. And I had to make up a folder and tell them where where it would show up, the page of the script that it would show up. I couldn't tell them the whole story of the show, and this went on for other films, and try to entice them to hook up with us and pay for the Juicy Juice. It's terrible stuff. And then also I worked in the television product placement for Fox, and that was for The Simpsons, and Butterfingers was the thing that we had to put on the show. I never want to see another Butterfinger as long as I live, because they'd send them to us, you know, but they also sent money. So that was an interesting time, and I would be assigned to go to these films to see where it showed up, and I'd report that back to my boss, and it was all free. You know, they paid for me to do that.
So you saw a lot of movies.
Yeah, and I'm
time.
still
Good.
a movie buff.
You're still a movie
weekend.
buff.
Yeah.
Then you retired in 1996. Retired, ha 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 ha. And you started something that you called Davis Diversified.
Yes, I did, and it just meant any job I wanted to take. And just jobs that didn't pay me as much as it did in Fox, but things I wanted to do and had a good time doing. And some of them were related to show business. And one place I went as a administrative assistant to the CEO of Drawlinger Company down in Westchester, the property management firm. I worked there for 19 years as their permanent temp. And that meant that anytime they needed a temp, they just would call me, and I'd sit in with somebody. And I left them, I worked till I was 86. And then I left then, and they gave me a terrific bonus and everything, because it was family run. And I made a lot of good friends down there.
By the way, if you drive down Sepulveda Boulevard through Westchester, you'll see Drawlinger's name all over the place,
Yeah.
including one of the streets was named for him.
Yeah, I was there for that.
You were there for that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And anything else?
You want me to tell a story about Archie?
Oh, Archie.
Yeah.
Archie, there was
This is
the
when I
flush.
This is when I was Archie. Carol O'Connor played Archie.
Archie Bunker.
Yeah, Archie Bunker and All in the Family. We did All in the Family. We did Carol Burnett, we did Smothers Brothers, Red Skelton, Glenn Campbell, all of these shows that I scheduled at TV City for CBS. And so one time I was in an event, and Carol Connor was there, and I met him, and he was holding my hands and smiling at me and everything, and he says, "And what department do you work in, my dear?" And I said, "Scheduling." And he says, "Poor dear, poor dear." And I'm thinking, does he know what a place that is to work? I mean, it's just a bullpen. It's just people screaming all over, the phone's ringing like crazy, but I liked it because it was a challenge. It was a challenge to put all that together and put a show together. So they wouldn't let me out to do anything else when women started doing men's jobs. And I wanted to be a stage manager or something like that. But they just kept making my title longer. So I was supervisor in charge of all production facilities for the CBS television network. And I always said that was a lot longer than the numbers on my paycheck. And that was true. So, you know, I can now say that was my favorite job. One time, Sammy Davis Jr. needed to do a recording of his medleys for Peter Lawford that was going to be on Playboy After Dark, one of our shows. So I had to set up a dark studio, a studio with nobody in it, and set this all up, 2 cameras and everything else. And one of the cameramen said, "Why don't you come up here? We'll put a stool in between our 2 cameras, and you know you can watch." So I did, and Sammy Davis sang to me all of his medleys. Sang it to me right where the first row is. That even is a little further away than I was from him. So that's one of the perks. And you know, I met a lot of celebrities, and there were some celebrities that you have to be very careful with. And like that broom closet that Lucille Ball was put in, you put Bob Hope in there, no problem, no complaints. One time I went down to pick him up at the Artist, and it was a weekend, and it was after Eisenhower died, and he was going to sit in a studio and be part of the people back in Washington that were talking about Eisenhower and everything. It's kind of a memorial service. So I went to get him and took him up this elevator, and it's one of those elevators that is pressed air or something. It just takes forever. I told him, I said, "This is the slowest elevator in town." And I said, you know, I make a joke that Milton Berle got on the elevator with Jack Benny and Bob Hope, and by the time they got down to the first floor, he had stolen all their jokes. So I told him that joke. And then he's saying, Bob Hope is saying, that he didn't know what, he says he's been to the doctor that day and he'd given him a shot and it was really hurting. And I said, "Well, we got a chair set up for you in the studio, but I guess you could stand up if you wanted to." And he laughed, and he just is really down to earth. Some celebrities, you had to just walk on nails, so to speak.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that pretty well covers it. Anybody have any questions for Peggy? Yes.
I wanted to know how we took care of 4 children.
How did you take care of 4 children in all of this?
I did. Penny?
My sister, the oldest sister, that's how.
Yeah. So my oldest daughter was 12 when Penny was born, so she was like a second mother to Penny. And she also helped with the other 2 boys, only they would always say, "You're not the boss of me." But so, and I had dishwashers but they were not plug-in, they were 2-legged. You know, and I had a schedule on the one bathroom about how long Michael could stay in the bathroom, how long Bill.
You were good at scheduling
I
things
scheduled
for
it.
the
That's
family,
how I did
right?
it. I scheduled. Oh my!
But-
wait a minute, my son-in-law wants this.
What's that? What's that black thing in front of you?
What's that plaque
This?
The plaque.
on the table?
Oh,
plaque.
this is a plaque I got with. I joined Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters, and if you get over 70, you can get the Diamond Circle
Whoops.
Award.
Let's put it
And
up
so
here for the.
that's up around here somewhere. It tells about for all my years in television. And it's Pacific Pioneer. Well, let's see. Alex Trebek is a member, and I've talked to him there, and some celebrities. And then they always have, when they have the events, they have a dais, and they have somebody that we're honoring, and we've had celebrities. The guy that played the Fonz. Yeah, we had him one time. He was great. He was so helpful, and he was so gracious about everything. I wish I'd taken the chance to look into that before we came here. You want to talk
Okay.
about travels?
Any other questions?
Of all the things that you've done in your life, the many talents that were given to you, the many interesting and wonderful things you did, do you have an absolute favorite?
An absolute favorite of all of the things that you did.
Probably taking me up on her first solo flight.
Yes, that was wonderful. And we flew over where we used to live in Arcadia. That's a favorite thing, to learn how to fly. And one time I went on my first solo flight that I had to go to a certain airport away, and I had to prove that I landed. They make you bring back a match book or something to show that you landed there. And I remember thinking, and it was up at Oceana on the 5-city area, or Royal Grande and everything, just before you turn into San Luis Obispo. And San Luis Obispo didn't have any gas, so I couldn't stop there. But Oceana did, and it was out near the ocean, and you have to fly over the ocean when you're going to land, and that runway looks about this big. I had to go around twice before I could, and that was scary.
Okay, well, you also now have the distinction of being the first person in these interviews to have talked longer than I did. So thank you so much, Peggy.
First time I've been asked to tell all these stories. It was so fun.
Marvelous. And there's lots of other pictures here, so take your time in looking at all of them and enjoy.
And there's some
God
books
bless you
over
all.
there and stuff, you know. Thank you, everybody. It was so much fun for me.